Welcome to Mishna study. We're up to Masechet Peah, Perek Zayin, Mishna, Perek Gimel, Mishna Zayin. Over here, we're going to speak about the minimum size of a field that you need for Peah, right? How big of a field do you need in order to give Peah? We'll see a mahloket between many Tanaim. And then we're going to start to digress into, you'll see, through the end of the Perek, just a quick digression. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Karka bet rova hayevet b'peah. Rabbi Yoshua Omer, ha'osa sa'atayim. Rabbi Tarfon Omer, shisha al shisha tefachim. Rabbi Yoshua ben Betera Omer, kede liksor v'lishnot v'hadacha kidvarav. Rabbi Akiva Omer, karka kol shehu hayevet b'pe'ah. Uba bikurim, v'lichtov alav perozbol, v'liknot imo nechasim she'en lahem achrayut b'chesef u'b'shtar u'b'chazaka. Okay, so starting off with Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, how much of a field do you need to own in order to give Peah? So karka bet rova, that's hayavin Peah. So bet rova is literally a place, a field that you need a rova, reva hakav, in order to plant it, right? So how much seeds would you need to plant? So it's about, a quarter of a kab. A kab itself is 24 betzah. So a quarter of that would be 6 betzah worth. Each betzah is about approximately 3, volume ounces, right? 3 ounces of volume measurement. So this comes out to 18 ounces of volume measurement. That's how much seed he would hold in his hands. A field big enough in order to plant all those seeds. Rabbi Yoshua says, "Ha'osa sa'atayim," right? A field that's big enough in order to produce 2 se'ah worth of grain. Rabbi Tarfon Omer, shisha al shisha tefachim, right? 6 by 6 tefachim, 1 amma by 1 amma, right? 1.5 foot by 1.5 foot. Rabbi Yoshua ben Betera Omer, kede liksor v'lishnot v'hadacha kidvarav, right? In order to cut, right? So you take one swoop. Rambam explains it that you take, you grab one fistful of grain, and then a second time, right? So 2 bunches. The field, that big enough field, that's what you have here. And now the halacha kidvarav, over here, who's saying this? Halacha kidvarav. So it seems like it's Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, right? Rabbi Yehuda Nasi over here, who codified the Mishnah. He's been being posek halacha over here. Halacha is like Rabbi Yoshua ben Betera. Interestingly enough, though, based on the Talmud, right? Rambam will say later, halacha is not like Rabbi Yoshua ben Betera. Halacha is going to be like Rabbi Akiva, based on other principles that we have in Piskei Halacha. What does Rabbi Akiva say? Karka kolshu, any amount of land is going to be hayevet b'peah, right? Any amount is going to be hayevet b'peah. Now, additionally, any amount of land, you're also going to be hayav in bikurim, right? Right? Rotzilomar hava'at bikurim, right? Bringing the bikurim, meaning as long as you own land, you need to own land. You have to be a landowner in order to bring bikurim to Yerushalayim. How big of land do you need to own? Any amount of land. Similarly, right? If a person wants to write a perozbol, right? We know at the end of the 7th year, the end of the 7th Shemitah year, a person needs to forego all his debts, right? If he lent money to a poor person, he needs to say, that's it, it's canceled, the debt is canceled. Now, what happened was, the Torah warned, against actually, the 7th year is going to come, some of the wealthier people are going to say, I don't know, I don't want to lend the poor people, I don't want my debt to be canceled. And the Torah actually says, it shouldn't happen. I'm going to see it, I'm not going to give in. No, naton titen lo, you have to give him. But what happened? Historically, what happened with time? People didn't want to give. So Hachamim said, what are we going to do? Now the Aniyim aren't getting anything. Right? We can't just erase the halacha, right? We can't say, I'm just going to, discredit Shemitah. We can erase Shemitah from the Torah. We need to work within the framework of halacha as it's evolving, and we need to be able to work with it. But we can't just, cancel it. That's not an approach. So what did the Hachamim come up with? They came up with this concept called a perozbol, which basically you're writing your debt to the Bet Din, and the Bet Din is going to go ahead and collect that. Now, how does this work? The Bet Din is we're basically saying that you need to have land, meaning the person who borrowed money needs to own land, And then we could write this Peah's Bull, because as long as the person who borrowed money has land, now the lender could go ahead and there's a lien on what he lent out. At any time, you could go and take that land. Now, as long as the borrower has land, we're going to say it's as if the Bet Din owns that land, right? When the Shemitah comes, and when the Bet Din is allowed to go ahead and collect the money in return. So as long as you have any amount of land, you can write a Peah's Bull, right? The person who's lending is allowed to write a Peah's Bull, and therefore, and from there on, even after the Shemitah year, they would be able to collect the debt that was due to them. Similarly, any amount of land is good enough to purchase nechasim, right? To purchase any type of possessions, she'en lahem achrayut, that there are no responsibility attached towards them. How so? Through kesef, shtar, and hazaka, through money, through a shtar and hazaka. Now, Harambam over here goes, and he lays out some important principles just to understand what does it mean, possessions that there are no responsibility for. And he explains that there are two types of possessions. One is things that are movable objects, anything outside of land, right? So you have merchandise, coins, some precious stones, all those are called things, nechasim she'en lahem achrayut. There's no responsibility attached to it, they're possessions. Now, if someone, let's say someone lent me money, you lent me money. Now, I don't pay back on time. What happened was, you want to collect the money. I didn't pay you back. What happened in the meantime? I took something that I own. I took my watch, right? This is something that in a possession, she'en lo achrayut, and I sold it to someone else. You're not allowed, when you want to collect the money, to take that watch from the person I sold it to. But let's say I had property. I had a house, right? And you lent me money. Now comes to pay back the debt. I don't have the money to pay back. You're allowed to go. I went ahead and in between, I went and sold my property. I sold my house to someone. Now you are allowed to go and take that house from the person I sold it to because you had a lien on that house. So you're allowed to go take that house. Why? Because that is nechasim sheyesh lahem achrayut. That's property, right? That's a possession, that's property that there is a responsibility attached towards it. Now, what falls under this? Right, that was land falls under that, that category of possessions that, property that there's a lien or a responsibility attached to it. Now, additionally, it's important to know that possessions that don't have any responsibility attached to it, right? These are called metaltelin. You can only purchase them through meshicha, right? Through pulling, right? Through lifting the object. You cannot buy it with money. Right? I go to a store officially, din Torah. I want to buy a watch. I give them money. It's not mine until I actually lift the watch and take it into my possession. Right? Nor with the shtar, nor with the contract. Right? The only thing I could do is mishicha, actually pulling the object. But karka, right, which is nechasim sheyesh lahem achrayut, right, land. Those are purchased through kesef, through money, through a shtar contract, and through hazakah, using the property. So now go back to our Mishnah. What are we saying? We're saying that if a person goes ahead and he buys land, or one more principle, if a person does buy land, right, and he buys it through kesef, shtar, or a hazakah, right, he also buys the items that are on top of it, right? So if a person buys a house, he buys property, right? He's allowed to buy it with coins, with money. Now, he also, if he agreed to also purchase the furniture inside, that's also his, right? As soon as he uses it, uses that house, also that furniture becomes him, or he pays for it, that furniture also becomes his, agav, through the purchase of the property itself. So our Mishnah is teaching us what? That if you have any amount of land, and you purchase any amount of land, even though you're not allowed to purchase metaltelin, you can't purchase possessions through kesef, shtar, and hazakah, but because you're allowed to purchase land through that, if you purchase any amount of land, you also purchase the possessions that are on top of that land. And Harambam ends off halacha k'Rabbi Akiva, like I said earlier, and halacha is any amount of land, right? Doesn't matter how small, falls into this category that one is the minimum size of a field for Peah. And additionally, everything we said over here that, it's enough land to bring Bikurim for, it's enough land to write a Peah's Bowl for, and it's enough land that if you purchase possessions, agav, alongside that land, that would also all become yours. That's all for now. Next Mishnah, we're also going to see something also similar cases that fall under the category of nechasim sheyesh lehem achrayut, or karka koshu, better yet, karka koshu, that term of how it's going to flow through the end of the perek.